We don't like it. I mean, I don't know.
How do you deal? Free food.
It's kind of an accident, you know.
How do we deal with all the free eatings?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, try not to let it ruin our day.
We have a potluck.
We just buy bigger freezers.
That was a thing. People who hunt and then have a giant freezer in the garage for eating in the later months.
Mm-hmm. Grew up hunting deer and rabbit.
I never liked deer. I tried it once.
It's so good. It's so
venison.
Yeah, it's too much for me.
It's too metallic. I just don't like that.
That's
pretty
the right word.
pretty
You
rich.
have to like the gamey. You have to like.
Yeah, and I don't.
It is gamey.
Generally.
Have y'all tried horse?
No.
No.
Not to my knowledge.
Pretty sure my dog has, however.
Come on, y'all have had French
horse in
lasagna.
Japan.
You've had horse.
Well, it depends. Like, is it like where's the horse from? Is it just from a farm or is it from like a racetrack?
I don't know. I've tried horse sashimi in Japan.
Well, the reason why is because very few horses in the U.S. are bred for human consumption. So if they're bred for anything else, they generally have a lot of medications injected into them, which aren't healthy. Steroids for horses or race horses and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Although the French are fond of horse meat.
Do they?
Oh really?
Well, but there was the scandal too. I was referring to the scandal where
the one from the Irish butchery.
Yeah, there was horse meat showing up in frozen food.
And frozen beef, what was labeled as beef, had horse meat in it.
Particularly the frozen lasagna, I remember.
So
the consensus is we should all be vegetarian.
After this conversation, it is.
I avoid eating a lot of red meat. I mostly eat chicken.
I love red meat.
You should eat more fish.
And fish.
But I was reading that
oily fish.
I read a while ago. I don't know.
Oily
chicken
fish
is more sustainable than fish or beef.
But it's not about sustainability. It's about your personal health.
In that case,
chicken doesn't give you the omega-3 oils that reduce your risk of heart disease.
You tossing around.
Hey, so Dr. Ross, maybe we should start doing a tech show.
Maybe we should. That's a fine idea, Roger Chang.
That's funny.
All right, you guys ready?
Ready.
Born ready.
Hey, that's Patrick's line. Here. We're starting with you, Sarah Lane. Ready?
Oh, yes.
Here we go. 3, 2.
Thank you to everyone who supports Daily Tech News Show directly. To find out more, head to dailytechnewsshow.com/support.
This is the Daily Tech News for Friday, July 27th, 2018. From Los Angeles, I'm Tom Merritt.
And from Studio Feline, I am Sarah Lane.
And from Studio Hack 5, I am Shannon Morse.
Also joining us for the roundtable today, very happy to have back with us Rob DeMillo, CTO of Nimble Collective. How's it going, Rob?
It's good. I'm not in a studio, but at San Francisco.
Yeah,
got that going for me.
You call it a studio. You got a headset on, you got a laptop, you're streaming. It's a studio.
That's true. That's actually the message of our company. Just pop up a studio. You're good.
There you go. See, you're on brand even. Also with us, of course, we're very happy to have back our producer, Roger Chang. Roger, we missed you desperately yesterday. I'm not even joking.
Oh, well, that's good to know.
Yeah. Trying to host the show and do the screens was...
that never works.
A nightmare on my brain. So yes, we're very happy to have Roger back. And it's our roundtable show. This is the show we do once a month where we expand the regular show into full-fledged roundtable discussion, do a full hour of these discussions with all of us. And while all of our topics cover the news of the day, we will still start with a few tech things you should know.
MoviePass's service was unable to process ticket requests on Thursday. Why? Well, MoviePass hadn't paid the company that processes its payments. Parent company Helios and Matheson borrowed $6 million to pay that company and got everything working again. However, technical issues were blamed for continued outages on Friday. And this loan is half due August 1st with the total due August 5th.
This is not looking good. I'm sorry. This is not. Twitter reported monthly active users fell by 1 million as it removed bots and spam and failed to attract new users. Twitter says the user numbers will continue to fall this year because of both of those things. Twitter says it's prioritizing cleaning up the platform over near-term product improvements that could drive up usage. Twitter's daily active users were up 11%, though. That's the seventh quarter of daily active user growth. Twitter also reported its third straight quarter of positive income at $100 million. And for the first time, overseas revenue contributed the majority of Twitter's ad sales.
Telegram added a feature called Passport, which it calls its phase 2 of its Telegram login project. So a user can upload their ID to Telegram storage. It's protected then by end-to-end encryption. And then a website that requires an ID could implement Telegram Passport support instead of requiring an upload of their own. ePayments is one of the first to support this new feature.
And Google updated its Play Store app submission guidelines. It now explicitly bans apps that appeal to children but contain adult themes, apps that facilitate the sales of explosives, firearms, ammunitions, or firearm accessories, apps that are themselves cryptocurrency miners. Google also now bans apps with repetitive content in order to stop multiple versions made from templates, and apps that are primarily made of ads, as well as apps that intentionally mislead users.
LinkedIn added the ability to send contacts up to a 1-minute voice message. That's on its iOS and Android app. Messages can be played back on the website as well if you receive one, as well as the apps.
Finally, a Wilmington, Delaware jury awarded IBM $83.5 million in cash, not coupons, after finding the Groupon infringed 4 of IBM's e-commerce patents. Other companies had already paid IBM a license to use. IBM owns more than 45,000 patents, and IP licensing revenue brought the company $1.19 billion back in 2017. Groupon's legal defense argued that IBM never used the patents and wanted to extract money from other companies, but that didn't work for that jury. So possible appeals coming, but for now, IBM beats Groupon. All right, let's get into the roundtable discussion, Sarah.
Let's do it. And Shannon, we're going to start with you. This is a topic that we've covered on DTNS already this week. The idea that Google said, hey, physical keys are working out for us. Our employees aren't getting phished. By the way, we have one of our own. But the idea of physical keys being the most reliable way to make sure that you're not vulnerable to attacks is something that we're hearing more and more about. So what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts on this just because, you know, from my security background, I've always been a big proponent of getting out physical security keys. And the big business that's really been behind this, as far as FIDO goes and U2F, has always been Yubico with their YubiKey. So now we're seeing this Google one, and we've also seen kind of a difference in opinion between Yubico and Google as far as Bluetooth is concerned. But it's also kind of interesting seeing Google come out with their own, just in particular, because Yubico has always been the most popular one on the market. So I really just wanted to touch base on like why these are so important and why they exist in the first place, because a lot of people still don't use them, as well as if we think for consideration if they're actually going to get adopted by a wider audience and if Bluetooth itself is going to be a secure option for most people.
So are they proposing that these keys are for consumers or for businesses? What's the
they're starting selling them to businesses now, but they say they will make them available for consumers soon.
Okay.
Yeah, so interestingly, it's going to be available in a couple of different bundles. So they're doing the USB and Bluetooth versions of the key. It's called the Titan Security Key, and it's going to cost $50. Okay. But if you want to buy them separately, you can just get the USB version for like $20 or the Bluetooth version for $25. Now, in my experience working, going to DEF CON, for example, in like 2 weeks, we've always seen Bluetooth hacks. We've seen BLE hacks. We've seen Bluetooth 4.0 hacks. And this is really, really common. And it was one of the main reasons why I always suggest that, a headphone jack should still exist on a phone, for example. So seeing Yubico's, for example, their reply to this, Yubico actually said that they had started initiating using Bluetooth for physical keys. However, and they also contributed to some of the development for the U2F standards with BLE, but they decided against it, mostly just because of security, usability, and durability. So they said that the security assurance levels were not as good as NFC and physical USB because obviously physical USB is going to be the most secure option because there is no wireless protocol happening between the device and your laptop, for example, but also because it requires batteries and pairing that could offer poor user experience, which would likely turn off consumers in the long run if they wanted to get more people interested in this. So seeing that Google has decided to go ahead and go with Bluetooth for their security key, even though these hacks are quite prominent with that protocol, is, in my opinion, kind of unassuring. And I personally would want to stay with a key that does not offer Bluetooth, just so I don't even have that factor even remotely capable for a hack in any of my devices.
So they probably, I mean, it's not just the Bluetooth protocol, right? They probably have security protocols at either end that are locking people out. So it's more secure than like your Fitbit.
I would hope so. They did state that they have firmware built into these security keys that's supposed to implement some kind of security on top of there. Of course, we don't know exactly what all of that security is that's going into these physical keys, but it is run on top of that same U2F implementation, those same kind of standards as the FIDO Alliance currently has. So hopefully they're secure, but I do worry a little bit that, like, at a coming DEF CON, for example, we might see a hack happen with one of these Google security tokens. It's completely possible, and it's not outside of a current thought process that these things could be a possibility in the future.
Yeah, and this is the debate between like convenience versus ultimate security.
Exactly.
Right, going through the hassle of like plugging something in a USB port, like that's a hassle. Like animals, plugging through the USB port. But yeah, that's kind of interesting. Go ahead.
Yubico offers an NFC version. I mean, and that's pretty secure. So you can have the convenience and the security. I'm not sure why Google decided to go with Bluetooth.
You leave a dongle in your pocket. That's why. Right.
It's very odd.
Press it. You still have to click the button, right?
Yeah, you do still have to click some kind of button or give it some kind of assurance that you have that physical token within your being, on your person in some sense, or plugged into your computer if you're just straight up using USB instead. So why they included Bluetooth, I'm not quite sure as well. I would much prefer that they just include USB and maybe NFC as well, since those protocols are already implemented in so many other physical security tokens, and we know that they are much more secure. Now on that front as well, I do wonder if these are going to end up getting adopted by a wider range of an audience now that Google has implemented their own, because while I know of the Yubico name, and that's the most popular one within like the security community, a lot of people don't use physical tokens outside of the security community because they don't know that they exist. So given that Google, this huge popular name, they have, Google Homes all over the place and everything like that, now they exist and they're a household brand, a household name. I am curious if that's going to help more people adopt this kind of security factor, as opposed to using SMS for two-factor authentication or applications for two-factor authentication, because neither of those is as secure as a physical token.
Well, and with all of the data breaches that have happened in the enterprise over the years and will continue to, I can absolutely see why a large company like Google, where there's security measures and people who are interested in what might be going on behind the scenes, and lots of other companies, why an IT department might be like, you got to do this, everybody. Sorry, don't lose your key, and if you do, we'll figure it out. But it does really kind of 180 this whole trend that consumers have been enjoying and hoping to enjoy more, myself one of them, to like get rid of the wallets because everything's digital, and that whole idea of not having things to lose on your person.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I have lost my keychain before. So if I had a U2F token on my keychain, I would have lost that at the same time. But luckily I wasn't using it quite yet. I haven't lost my keychain since then because I protect it much better now. But usually what you find is, like with a two-factor authentication application on your phone, that's more likely to get stolen because people see a phone and they think like that's valuable. That would be a good thing to steal. When they see a key on a keychain or a little token like a little flash drive or something, that's not as likely to get stolen. So of course, you look at it that way, you think, well, they might be a little bit more secure in that sense. sense, they're also air gapped in a sense as well. So you can't hack a physical key like that unless you have that Bluetooth turned on, maybe.
Well, and I think it's worth pointing out too that Shannon works in the rarefied air of trying to get to as close to zero risk as possible. For folks out there using text messaging as their second factor, this Bluetooth dongle is way more secure than that. So it's all where you are on the gradient, right? Shannon's rightly comparing it to NFC or USB as when she says it's not as secure. It's still more secure than all the other options. It's actually probably, I don't know, Shannon, do you think it's more secure than an authenticator app? Because that can be phished, whereas the Bluetooth would have to be intercepted. And I feel like that's a lower risk. Yeah,
exactly. You're exactly right with that.
The other thing that occurs to me is if they get the Bluetooth side secure and it does work on a dongle, processors are fast enough on the phone, and there's a fingerprint ID on the phone. I would imagine that Google's end game, and probably the reason they have Bluetooth, is to move the whole thing to the phone.
I just wonder why they aren't, and maybe they are, and we just haven't seen it. I'm willing to accept that, but I'm wondering why there isn't more documentation about the Bluetooth implementation. Maybe it's on the FIDO site and they just assume anybody who's really cares about it will go find it. But usually when you put out something like this, you make it fully auditable and you say, like, this is what we're doing in case you want to poke holes in it. This is why we think it's super secure. And Shannon, it doesn't sound like either one of us have seen that from Google on the Bluetooth side.
I haven't, and I would love to see more documentation on that, even just some clarification from Google as far as what kind of Bluetooth implementation they're choosing to use. Because, for example, Bluetooth 5.0 is more secure than Bluetooth 4.0. Now, we do know that it's using BLE, but I want more information than just telling me that it's BLE, because they've built some standards on top of that, and I would like to know if they're using all of those standards.
But it would be interesting if it got built into the phone. Let's jump to the idea that, like, okay, let's say they've secured this.
Like built into Android?
Yeah, it's getting really close to Steve Gibson's squirrel situation. You
need to explain that to me.
I don't think I could explain it off the top of my head right now, but the idea is you have authentication, which only requires your device. You can do it all on the device.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And it would give so many people so much more convenience than what we currently have. Yeah. I still have a headache trying to get anybody in my friends and family to actually implement two-factor authentication on their accounts, unless it's forced by the company that they're signing up with. If it's not forced, they're not going to do it because they just look at it and think, oh, no, that's too much work. I don't want to put in a code every single time I log in. I'm just like, well, you're putting in your password already. Yeah. Might as well.
So how many Android users are out there in this group?
I do multi-use. I use iOS and Android.
So they've gotten pretty good at when you're doing two-factor authentication. They've gotten pretty good at just you look at your phone or you look at your Android watch and touch a button.
Yeah.
Right. And I can see them taking the secure measures that they're doing with this UTF dongle and moving it to a phone, using circuitry in the phone and using bioidentification on the phone to make sure that you're trying to get access to this website or application. You have your device on you and you are you. Like, those are really the three things that you need. And then you just have to secure all the pathways between them.
Although sometimes security is like, I hate to admit this, but I'm currently locked out of my 1Password account because I can't remember my master pass because I didn't write it down somewhere and put it in a drawer. And it's like darn near impossible to get back in. There are lots of yes, exactly. Like there's like tutorials online that lead you nowhere. And so I'm like, all right, I'll just change all my passwords and start over. Now because it's like, it was supposed to be human proof, but it human proofed me out of my own human proofing.
Well, and that's what FIDO's overriding mission is. If people don't know, FIDO is a multi-company effort. It's not owned by Google. It's not a single company. And the idea is to come up with a system that's more secure than passwords, but easier to use for people.
Yeah, FIDO's an alliance of companies, and they're all trying to work towards the same thing, and they're trying to make the general populace more secure by adding this kind of convenience with these physical tokens, for example, as an option for people. And I think that they're really going in the right direction, but there's still a lot of like education that we need to get out there as far as how these things work and why they're better than SMS text messaging and stuff like that. Because if you don't know, like your SMS phone number, it could be cloned on a second SIM card by social engineering your phone carrier. And it's happened multiple times, not just to like journalists, which of course they've written stories about their experiences, but also like normal day-to-day people that aren't in a public eye. So it's kind of a scary thing if you think about it. Like if you have a stalker or if you have some kind of enemy in school or something like that that knows your phone number and can social engineer that information, then you run that possibility of having your SIM just cloned to a second device and getting all of those SMS two-factor authentication codes sent to that second device instead of your phone. And then other people could log into your accounts. And that's really one of the biggest things that the biggest proponents that they're trying to fight against is the abilities for, attackers to target people and be able to run these kind of attacks against them. And I props to FIDO for, fighting this hard fight. Yeah. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
How does FIDO connect with the RSA? Does it at all, or?
I don't think so, but I'll have to check on that for you.
Because the RSA is also, it's another alliance they tried doing this in the late 90s, I want to say, early 2000s with credit card devices that were essentially two-factor authentications like we have on the phone right now.
Yeah. I remember that. And then RSA got hacked too. Their codes did.
Which, by the way, is interesting because I don't, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Google has been hacked ever. Is that true?
I would never want to say never.
I don't think they. I might be wrong, but I know that I know their drive and photo systems have not. I know that.
I'm sure they have been hacked because they're involved in so many different things that there must be some low-level system at some point, especially earlier than the days, in the early 2000s. But yeah, I mean, your point can still be well made. You rarely, when have you heard of Google breach? Right. In the news, and they made a big deal earlier this week before they announced that they were selling the keys, that implementing keys in their company reduced phishing attacks inside to zero, which implies that there were phishing, there were successful phishing attacks inside Google before that. So they just didn't make it public.
Good point.
So I have a question for y'all. And yes, I said y'all again. Do you currently use a physical token for two-factor authentication? Do you use 2FA at all? What do you use?
Oh, yeah.
I obviously use a physical token myself, but I use an app as a backup.
I use an app only. So I've got two apps, but I use 2FA and I use Google Authenticator and I forgot the other one, but I use two of them.
I use Yubico, YubiKey, for certain things that I really care about. I mean, it's all a matter of thing, but I log in on devices that don't have a USB slot quite often. Right. And so I generally rely on the Authenticator app. I don't use Authy, even though I've heard Authy is great, because the big advantage to using Authy is that Authy will store your one-time codes in the cloud. And I feel like, well, that's kind of against the point. I'm sure Authy's very secure about it, but no one can get my code from the cloud if it's not in the cloud. So Authenticator is where I go.
I use Authy. Oh.
Do you store it in the cloud?
I do.
Oh,
yep.
Okay.
I know.
Good to know.
It's one convenience that I have chosen to take.
Well, that light jazz music from the Andrew Ellen Trio reminds us that it is time to move to the next topic. And this one's a fun one. Rob, we want to talk about liquid water on Mars.
Yeah, this goes back to my old life. But the other week there was the ESA folks, the European Space Agency, announced that they completed a 7-year study and have determined that there is actually water underneath the substrate in Mars at the South Pole at the very least. And they did this through their Mars Explorer, or Mars Express, sorry. So,
which is an orbiter, right?
It's an orbiter, yeah. They launched Mars Express in 2003, I think. So it's been up there for a long time. And it has, one of the instruments that it has on there is something called MARSIS, which is Mars Advanced Radar for Subsurface and Ionospheric Sounding, I think is what it stands for. And its whole purpose in life was to look underneath the substrate. It's just looking for essentially geographic signatures of things that may be of interest to future explorers of Mars. And it suddenly occurred to them that if they had reduced the resolution a little bit on their side imaging radar, the SAR system, the synthetic aperture radar, that they could get down to the resolution where they could detect substrate water. And so they did that, but it took them a long time. So NASA has a long history of updating firmware on spacecraft while they're in mission. And it's very—
that sounds like a bad idea.
Very, very frightening. When I was working in jet propulsion, we were on Voyager was one of our programs. And before I arrived, they had done this whole thing where they turned Voyager into something that could make it all the way out to Uranus, which it was never designed to do. And they did that through a firmware upgrade. And so, they've got everyone checking the code, and they check the code twice, and 3 times, 4 times. And then there's at one moment where somebody punches a button, and then they wait, 22 minutes with goes to the spacecraft, and the spacecraft reboots, and hopefully they hear from it again. They do this a lot. And they did it.
I don't even want to do that with my router in my
No. Yeah.
I mean, I do, but yeah,
my DevOps director here does things on the phone all the time, and I'm like, wow, okay. So anyway, so they did this with the Marsus, and they reduced the resolution path, and they took a couple swipes over the South Pole, and sure enough, just off to the southwest, I think, of the northwest of the pole, they got water signatures back. And to synthetic aperture radar, and I should probably explain what that is. There are several types of radars that are employed on aircraft and cars now and spacecraft. And synthetic aperture radar just basically means that they're using the motion of the spacecraft or of the aircraft to create a virtual lens for the radar beam. So typical radar, you send out a signal, either light or sound or radio waves, and it bounces back and it gets picked up. And then you build up an image off of that. In the case of SAR, you're using a moving spacecraft or a moving airplane to essentially shoot a beam and then catch it. So you shoot a beam in one direction, and then you know what the incidence angle is supposed to be, and the spacecraft keeps moving, and you catch it at the other end, and you've effectively formed a large radar dish. And you do that in several dozen sweeps in the area that you want to take a look at something. There's some complex math that shows what your resolution is based off of how fast the spacecraft's moving and all that other happy stuff. But so they did that, and they changed Marsus so that it had a smaller level of resolution, and they got back a signature of water about a mile underneath the surface. And what that looks like on a radar beam is nothing. So if you think of radar as reflecting off of an object, and the type of scattering that you get back tells you information about what it just bounced off of. Water is absorbent to SAR, and so you don't get a signal back. And so if you hit water, you get black, right? And what Roger's got up on the screen here is essentially false color. So what's blue on that screen would have been black when they got the data back. So people got very excited. So the evidence is not 100% in yet. It is strongly suggestive of there being water under the surface, which then leads to all sorts of interesting questions. Like, what is that water? Like, what is it like? What happens to water that is left behind on Mars? A lot of people have a lot of theories about all of it, but it means a lot of things to us. It means a lot about the geographic evolution of the planet. It also means that there is a potential for sending habitats to Mars, because if there's water, even if it's heavily salinated, and it's probably very brackish water, you can filter the salt out. And
yeah, because I know you mentioned this, but the temperature is below freezing, well below freezing, so it has to be pretty salty, because salts lower the freezing point of water. It has to be pretty salty if it's liquid.
Yeah, Mars is kind of interesting because it's the the size of the planet Earth, and so it's a third the gravitational pull, and so that puts some upper limits on the kind of molecules that can just drift off into space. Like a lot of lighter molecules just leave.
Oh, yeah.
But the heavier molecules like water stick around, and salt sticks around, and all this stuff. So yeah, it's interesting stuff.
So it's not something we're just going to pop a straw down and drink.
I wouldn't.
First
I
of
mean,
all,
Tom, you
because
can try that.
you'll freeze.
We're not going to.
I drink your milkshake.
I drink your Mars shake.
I mean, are there indications of what minerals might be in the water on Mars based on what has been already seen in sediment on Mars that could prove beneficial to humans, whether we could get it back somehow or
Yeah, I mean, there's some logical guesses people are making, right? So the radar data is not going to tell you that, because water is not going to return a signal, so you're not going to see any sort of backscatter, and you're not going to be able to tell actually what's going on the surface or under the surface. But we do have some fairly reasonable idea of what's in the silicates in the soil, and what's the sand made out of, what the South Polar ice cap, which I think is where this is from. I think they got the data from the south, not the north. So South Polar ice cap. So they have some idea of all those chemicals there. And so, yes, they could put together some models and say, okay, so these particular chemical elements are in that soil. We know for sure. We know that the water's been there at least, pick your time frame, 12 million years, whatever it is. And so we know that the sediment, I can't say the word, the sand, the sand around that area has a certain ratio of filtering to the chemicals that are going down. So they can guess what it might be like.
And there are extremophiles on Earth that can live in temperatures that low if there's liquid water. So, immediately all the headlines jump to, possibilities of life. But it is, as you said, there are still some questions to be answered before you can be 100% certain that liquid water is there. In fact, there's a Chinese orbiter that's supposed to launch in July or August 2020, the Mars Global Remote Sensing Orbiter, which would be able to provide further data to help confirm this. But right now they're saying it's more likely than not. So we're going to go with that assumption. Then if that's true, the question could be, what possibility of some single cell life surviving there is there? If there was ever life on Mars, that possibility becomes quite high. If Mars has always been dead, then no, there's probably not anything there.
Right. Or there could be fossilized material there, and bacterial size fossils. But yeah, there's a lot of possibilities that open up. But for me personally, the most exciting thing to me is it opens up the potential for human habitation.
Yeah, because you can extract that water, desalinate it, and not that those things are easy. Extracting it and desalinating it are tough, but it's possible. It becomes possible.
You can drink it. You can turn it into fuel. You can turn it into air. It saves a lot of transportation to and from the planet. So
yeah,
there's definitely fish aliens on Mars.
Yeah, if Doctor Who has taught us anything, yes, they're
Martian salt.
I do have a question about how the SAR, is that how you say it? SAR? How that works compared to LiDAR, which I know has been used on planet Earth to find archaeological sites and things like that. So are they in any way, shape, or form similar to each other?
Same principle. The L in LiDAR it's either laser or light. I forget which one it is, but it shoots a linear beam out. So it's got a smaller penetration than radar waves do, or than radio waves do, but the concept is very, very similar. So anything that sends out radiation and it measures what gets bounced back is considered one of the R's. It's one of the R's. One of the radars. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because
LiDAR is interesting. Actually, LiDAR works really well for LiDAR works really well for determining wake vortexes behind planes, because you can measure changes in the atmosphere. So you see the turbulence through LiDAR. So there was, back when I was working for the FAA, we were doing a lot of experiments with using LiDAR in the front of aircraft to look at aircraft in front of that aircraft to make sure that they were avoiding the wake vortex behind the wings.
Very
that's interesting.
Yeah. So we have one, I can't remember the name of the other orbiter, and Rob, maybe you'll remember it. There was an orbiter that looks at a wavelength that it doesn't see the reflection that indicates the water. And it wouldn't. So that
it wouldn't.
Yeah. So that one is sort of saying, well, we haven't seen anything, but then we wouldn't. You've got the orbiter that they've now sort of reanalyzed the data to be able to see this reflection, and then we've got the Chinese orbiter that could confirm it. But what would really confirm it is send something down there and start drilling around, see if you spot a gusher.
Yeah.
What's involved with that? Is that just ridiculous to think about?
It's not ridiculous to think about, but consider it's a mile down. That's I think it's over a mile down, if I remember.
Oh wow.
And so it's hard to drill a mile here. Right? We do it. There are scientific explorations and oil drilling and all that stuff that does go down that far, but it takes a lot of effort. And so to package up a drill that can go down a mile and shoot it off and get it to another planet and have it do a drill down for a mile, that's asking a lot. Yeah. So you would have to be able to construct the drill and the drill bits there using available materials and have a robot essentially. We were talking about 3D assembly before.
I was just thinking, but NASA is just finished the first phase of a 3-phase competition to create the ability to 3D print structures on Mars using Martian material. Most of that stuff they're making is some kind of concrete analog, though. That's not going to help you with drilling, unfortunately.
No, but you could. I mean, there's silicates in the soil. And so with silicates, you can make glass drills that are very hard and do that kind of stuff. So there's stuff you could do.
Making some diamond drills on Mars and then break them up into rings and sell them back on Earth.
That sounds like a Beatles song. Diamond drills on Mars.
This is super exciting, though. Just the idea of there's water on Mars, right? Like, however salty or however small. What is it? 25 kilometers wide, 1 kilometer deep.
It's what's unclear to me though, Tom, is if that patch. That's all they looked at.
Oh, right.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's unclear to me if they just stopped looking or if they're going to plan on looking in different areas at the same time. But
no, I did read that they want to keep looking because if they can find other indications of it, then that could mean there's sort of like Antarctica has a hydraulic system that connects various lakes together under the ice. That would be super exciting.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
I kind of see Mars water as like the new charcoal water. Or like, how is it good for me? It just is.
It's from Mars.
Filled with it's really good stuff. It's like Fiji water, but way better.
Unadulterated by human.
Gets bottled and
habitation.
They're shipped out through Whole Foods. Yeah, it's great.
Well, there is the music once again that brings us to the end of this topic. Sarah, what do we have next?
Well, sometimes when I think of what a Martian would be like, or an alien of some kind, I think of teenagers, because the older I get, the less I understand them.
Because when you're a teenager, everyone else is an alien. And when you're an adult, the teenagers are aliens.
It's happened. I no longer understand a lot of teen behavior. We're going to focus on a really interesting article Taylor Lorenz wrote up at The Atlantic titled, "Teens Are Debating the News on Instagram." You might say, okay, well, Instagram is being used, but this is actually a very interesting use case I was not familiar with beforehand. So somebody let me know if you've heard of the idea of flop accounts on Instagram. Now, a flop account to me, I was like, flop house? It's something that's like temporary. I don't, no, it's actually really different. A flop account kind of refers to something equivalent to a fail account. So it's an account that is created and often has a variety of admins who all have access. So it's a, group posting effort that is designed to get a community rallied around something, off color, a YouTube star said, someone in the public eye, a politician perhaps that said something that was inappropriate, or non-PC, or just dumb, or just bad behavior in general. And the interesting thing about these accounts is, because of course it's Instagram and there are some limitations there, is it's based on a visual meme, something that is describing the idea of the post, and then what everybody is who's following the account has to say about it. Now you might say, all right, well, that's just kind of like meme stuff. But a lot of the accounts are quite serious. And the Atlantic article does a really good job. It has lots of examples of really, intelligent as far as the young person's view of life, and of course there are many of them, but that sort of particularly important view of how they are seeing the news that they're getting. And what Taylor, the author of the article, kind of said is there's a really real common thread here, and a few of them actually, and it's obviously teenagers want to avoid adults, right? So these sorts of things are something that are kind of going on behind the scenes. And, you know, the average mom might look at that account and be like, I don't know, I don't understand what this is. So it's a little bit of a code thing. And that's been going on for years. Teenagers always wanted to do that, but also distrust in what they would consider an authority. And that also includes the media. And a lot of that is kind of warranted. And a lot of that is coming down from older people telling them that they shouldn't trust the media. So that is, it seems to be a growing trend. And then also the idea that, okay, well, if you're going to introduce some sort of a topic about, you know, some social subject that is heavy, and you are relying on a lot of comments on an Instagram post, right, in one of these flop accounts, which is for the most part calling somebody out for doing something bad, you're going to get a lot of troll comments. That's the way it goes. People get mad. People, you know, it's that sort of chaos that I think a lot of us think, oh, we're just always trying to get away from it. Well, there are a lot of young people who have never known life without online trolling and that sort of anonymity that allows you to act a certain way and maybe do things that you wouldn't have done otherwise. But where we feel like there's a choice, the younger you are, you know, the lines are a little bit more blurred. And then, of course, because of doing things that that might be uncovered later, there's that whole, not always poor understanding, but often, you know, incorrect understanding of long-term consequences of doing things. For example, saying something online, not getting a job because of it years later in life.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Shannon, I wanted to actually get your thought on this. The idea, well, everybody's thought, but you first, the idea that, okay, there's kind of this whole privacy thing going on, right? But starting an Instagram account and, you know, talking about stuff is like, that is not the privacy tool that you should be using if you actually care about locking yourself down and locking adults out of your life.
No, 100%. It is not. Like my sister would probably think this is funny, and she's the closest thing I know personally to a teenager. I mean, it's just a little odd. I just went down a rabbit hole of reading some of these flop accounts and the kind of Instagram posts that they post, and a lot of it just seems like, you know, straight up opinions and a lot of hate and aggression towards, you know, folks that think differently from them, whether that's right or wrong, you know, that's up to them. That's totally cool. But if they're just trying to do this to steer clear of their parents, shouldn't they be using something that's encrypted, like Signal, to talk to their friends? Like, it just seems like this is a way to air, you know, how they feel with the public. And but given that they're using a lot of their real names in their profiles, it's not necessarily private.
I'm sure there are plenty of teens using encrypted tools, and you don't know about them because they're using encrypted tools, right?
They're using WhatsApp, right?
or Signal or something, you know, something else.
I bet they're not. I bet that's not true.
Oh, I know there are teenagers using those things. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I see teenagers, and they just use unencrypted things all the time. So,
many do, yes.
Yeah. And the thing that bothers me about this whole story is, how is this different from your wacky Uncle Lenny posting some lunatic thing on Facebook? Mm-hmm. And then people picking it up and using it as a source.
If I have this right, it's I don't like the olds looking down their nose at me. I want to talk to my friends away, which is a perfectly normal behavior at that age. I don't trust the media because it is just one person's opinion. And we've seen how many times articles end up being wrong. So I want to talk it out. And there's this idea that I'll go into this corner using security through obscurity that nobody looks at. It started as just, let's make fun of these memes, and it's become a place where we can be free to discuss. But it's replicating every single community on the internet, going back to news groups. They always start as a niche place where everybody's like, oh, everybody here gets it. Everybody here understands me, and we can have a free-flowing exchange of ideas and discover truths that we couldn't otherwise because of the special nature of this area. And then it becomes more popular. And then the problems of community management pop up. And then it turns into a troll fest. And I don't think flops have gotten there yet, but then it becomes a place of flame wars. And the fundamental nature of it changes and it loses that early promise. The thing that scares me most about this article, and granted, it's The Atlantic writing about teens, so there may be a slanted view here. We're only getting this view on it in this article. But what scares me is this idea of, well, I don't trust the people who deal in facts because sometimes they're wrong, which is not inaccurate. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go talk with like-minded people because then we can disagree about stuff and come to an agreement that's true. That's called also mob rule.
Mm-hmm.
When you get a bunch of people who maybe even disagree to agree that something is true, that also does not make it true. That just means you've all decided to agree on it.
We're getting further and further away from the fourth estate. We're getting the reporters used to have to take tertiary sources for a reason, right? Before they could report on anything, regardless of your viewpoint, whether you took a liberal newspaper or a conservative newspaper or news media or news media outlet, you could be fairly well assured that that what's being reported on was factual to at least the reporter, right, and verifiably so. And then Facebook started and all this nonsense that we're in the middle of right now, where it's okay to simply say things, and it gets very Orwellian. You can change the past by simply saying the same thing over and over again, no matter whether it's true. Yeah. And this feels like that to me. This feels like teenagers who are trying to come into grips with the world, and they're not quite ready for it, and they're not consulting adults, so they don't really know what's real and what's not real, and just repeating things over and over again until a meme becomes reality.
It sounds like confirmation bias to me.
Yes,
I think it's a symptom of the lack of teaching critical thinking to kids. Mm-hmm. Which has declined over the years, so that they are trying to learn how to think critically here. They've got the right impulse. Like, I'm not just going to accept things from the media. Let's talk it out. And that's the right impulse, but they don't have the right tools to do it. If they don't have the right tools to do it, that's going to turn out poorly. There's always been fringe media. There's always been The Nation and National Review and Mother Jones. But people just didn't come across it as much. If you're not prepared to think critically, you are more likely to accept something you read online as being from a credible source, and then when it turns out not to be true, decide to distrust everyone. When what you should be doing is classifying things in your head like, oh, this is a source that I usually can trust. This is a source that maybe I can trust. And this is a source I don't know. And so I'm not going to trust it until I find out otherwise.
Nobody wants to hear an old man say this, but I'm going to say it anyway, so I apologize ahead of time. Back in my day, when I was in high school, we were required to take a debate course. It was a requirement.
I had to do that in college. I hated it.
Well, yeah, but you did it.
I was not required
of it. Yeah.
Although I am slightly younger than y'all as well, but we weren't required to take a debate course or like a public speaking class either. Mm-hmm. Nothing like that, which teaches you to, base your arguments on facts and, go into a library and learn all of those different things. Like, we didn't have to do that. I ended up taking I forget the name for it, but an extra class just for like the extra credit of having that class. Yeah, an elective, just so that I could get a little bit of knowledge as far as public speaking goes. And that was the only time in school, including university, that I had a chance to kind of come up with an argument and share that information. And I had to have source material in there that was not Wikipedia, mm-hmm. and all that kind of information. And
Wikipedia was out when you were taking this class?
Well, in college it was. And my journalism teacher strictly said, if you use Pluto. Wikipedia, I will fail you.
Cliff notes.
Did you guys ever have mock trial in high school?
Oh yes, yeah.
No.
That was that was our senior year. Was our big mock trial.
We never had that. We weren't required to take any debate or anything in high school. In college, the University of Illinois required a rhetoric class or a speech communications class, which is, sort of.
It doesn't have to be a debate class. It's just anything like mock trial works, and what Shannon just described works. I mean, anything that gives you a tool to put in your tool belt that allows you to not pick up the newspaper and immediately accept what's there, or not watch mm-hmm. something on the internet.
And what's interesting you say that about a newspaper, because I remember in junior high I had back when it was called social studies, which included a lot of civics. One of the things we had to do for the year was to bring in a news article and then break it down, like what the story was talking about, what were the facts, what was the impression or the not the opinion, but kind of what the view was basically set on. And we also did the same thing for political cartoons. We had to bring in each week had to bring in a political cartoon and break down the symbolism and metaphors that were explicit or implicit in the cartoon and write it down. I mean, you had to write it down, then you had to explain it to the class.
I remember in my speech comm class, I cited The Economist and Scientific American as sources, and the professor told me to go back and do it over. She was saying those are sources that tell you where to find sources. So those are great sources to find out the sources you should cite. Go find out where they got their information, and then you can cite that. And it really pushed me to realize, like, oh, wait, The Economist can get something wrong. Scientific American can get something wrong. I need to cite the actual paper from the scientific. I need to cite the actual economist's work that they're talking about. And it was something I never would have thought about if I hadn't taken that course.
Same with my journalism teacher. And there's been, even with ThreatWire, which I currently do and currently use a lot of sources for it, there's been multiple times when I'll run across some factual information on a news source that's incorrect. And I don't know that until I click through to whatever the PDF document from the government is, or whatever I'm trying to read up on. And then I find the actual information and I'm like, okay, I'm going to link directly to this instead, because then people are I'm just going to add to that incorrect information to my own audience, which, makes me lose some of my own personal credit in my own mind.
And that's an echo chamber.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, just to sort of dovetail a little bit off of the original Atlantic article, when I was doing some research, like you did, Shannon, I was like, why are all these flop accounts? Where have I been? I came across an article. This is from the New York Times about a year ago, called The Secret Social Media Lives of Teenagers. Also very fascinating. I learned about an app called Vaulty, which I really should have known about, where you can more or less hide photos that you don't want your parents to see and then give them a fake password so they think they're an administrator, but you're actually still hiding photos from them. Very clever. But it also cited a UCLA study that was from 2016 that was kind of looking at teenage brains in general and how they are different than children's brains, but not adult brains quite yet, and how the sort of cognitive function is unique. And the study found that teens' brains focused on reward processing and social cognition similarly activated when they thought about things that maybe you associate with power, money, or sexual activity, or a photo that receives lots of likes on social media. So there is some sort of a firing thing that's going on where you're getting kind of that boost that you don't necessarily know is making you feel powerful.
Yeah, and money, sex, and likes.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
It's a great movie.
Yeah.
Actually,
sex, drugs, and likes on Instagram is the new way of living.
Good documentary series on teens that will be upcoming on DTNS Labs. But yeah, the whole thing is I think that this whole idea of flop accounts and young people saying, we don't like the way this is going is, in one sense, it's like, yeah, kids do this. But we are also in a climate, politically, socially, and otherwise, where more and more people in positions of power are being outed as people who have abused positions of power. So you really can't blame this to be a trend that is not going away. And the tools are creating, whether it's how realistic it is or not, is creating that feeling of we're self-sufficient, strength in numbers, wisdom of the crowd, which is rife with holes, as we've all discussed.
Yeah. When I was a teenager, I thought I was a fully formed adult and your brain is not done forming. So you feel that way. It's perfectly normal to feel that way, but you don't have quite the inhibitions yet. You aren't able to resist taking risks as easily, which is, evolutionarily sound. It allows us to do a lot of great stuff as a species. But
it's worse than that. I'll dig this up and send it out to everybody. But there was a study done about 10 years ago, and I assume it's still valid, I don't know, where they went through the cognition process, and there's a distinct pathway that has to get built out before you can start making what you're referring to as adult decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your moral centers don't form until your early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And it was shocking to read this stuff.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean you don't have morality. A lot of
Correct.
times, when I was a teen, if you would have said this to me, like, screw that, of course I know what right and wrong is. That's not what it means. It means it's not fully formed.
It's not fully formed. You don't understand moral consequences.
Yeah.
You don't understand that by insulting her, it's going to come back in a way that you're not expecting.
Well, and you may understand that, but it's just not as fully formed and gut instinct. And you won't realize that until later, right?
It was a fascinating read. So I'll send it.
All right, let's move on to our final discussion. This is the one suggested by our patrons at the advisor level. If you're at the advisor level, among the many perks you get to suggest topics and then vote on them to be included in the roundtable. And the one that got the most votes this time was, what unanticipated side effects is GDPR having on businesses in Europe as well as in the US? Now, I'm just going to go over some of the side effects. They may or may not be unanticipated, but I think it gets to the heart of what the topic should be. GDPR went into effect on May 25th. We've talked about it a lot on the show, but if you're unfamiliar, it's a privacy requirement. It requires companies to handle customer data in a way that ensures privacy, that ensures consent, and gives back some control to the customer over their data. It only applies to the European Union, but any company with an EU customer has to obey it for its EU customers, which means in a lot of cases, it's just easier or cheaper to apply it to all your users. Also, you can't force consent for data collection unless the collection is essential to run the service. So if I've just got a blog up, I can't say, to read my blog posts, you have to give me your social security number, because it is not essential for people to read your blog to know their social security number, right? So that's going to play in here. A few of the interesting side effects so far are an increase in security breach reporting, which you might have guessed, because it requires you to report security breaches within 72 hours of becoming aware of the breach. So in the UK alone, breach reporting went from 400 a month in March and April to 700 in May, when GDPR went effect at the end of the month, to 1750 in June. Also some overcautiousness. And this is one I'd like to get y'all's reaction on. There's some anecdotes of companies requiring small vendors to have certifications and other paperwork in order to reduce liability. It's not something that GDPR requires, but companies are somewhat responsible under the GDPR for what their vendors do with their customers' data. And so I'm curious if you guys have heard of that, or if that makes sense to you, this sort of chilling effect of a company saying, yeah, we'd like to hire you, give us your ISO certifications and all this other stuff that they normally wouldn't have asked for.
Well, it does make sense to me in light of things that have happened, for example, with Facebook and the different vendors that one of their applications was using for what was it? The personal information that was leaked. Yeah. They had a vendor involved, and things like that. Of course, they're going to have access to that information, so they need to make sure that a vendor is protecting that information, or they are allowing people to opt into sharing that information with them as opposed to having to opt out. So it does make sense that they would need to abide by that, just to, ensure that they don't end up not complying with GDPR in the future.
Although those particular instances could tie back to our moral conversation.
Totally good. Yeah.
They could pass. They could pass all the.
But what if you're a small 2 or 3 man company and you provide some login form validation? That's all it is. And the company says, just to be GDPR safe, we need these 5 certifications, and you're like, we can't afford the time or money to get those certifications, and you lose the contract.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm with Shannon. I think it's a legitimate cross to bear. You can't expect there to be no hurdles in a company that's trying to make money, right?
Also, the Information Commissioner's Office is advising organizations to please not report every breach, but determine whether each breach is indeed required to be reported under the rules of GDPR.
I love that.
Because companies are like, we don't
high
know.
call volume.
We're just going to report it. That way we can't get in trouble. Also, ICO advising companies to use all 72 hours to gather information. Don't just report immediately, because then you might be able to find out whether you need to report it or not. Yeah.
Well, it's good that they have 3 days at least to report things. It's nice that they have that ability so that they can do some research, because if they end up getting inundated with reports 24/7 from companies who don't necessarily need to report some kind of breach or some kind of leak of information or whatever it might be, then the people involved on researching these reports when they are received are just going to get completely boggled by all of the information that's coming in, and they might miss something. So it is very wise to take that 3 days and make sure that you're researching everything you need to before sending in that information.
But I think it's incumbent on the EU to provide clear guidelines of what you will and won't get in trouble for.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think that's what's causing this. All right, let's get to the heart of the matter, the effects on companies. There were some early reports that Facebook and Google were seeing more advertising directed their way, away from smaller ad exchanges, for the same reason that we were talking about with the vendors. Companies were like, well, Google and Facebook are really good at getting consent, so we're going to buy our ads through there because it's going to be less trouble than these smaller companies that we're not sure whether we trust that they're in full compliance. Mm-hmm. That doesn't seem to have carried on. We haven't seen a lot more about that. So maybe that was just a first week's reaction. I haven't seen much more about that. But we have seen people mentioning GDPR in their earnings reports and elsewhere. eBay says it's seeing minimal disruption to date from GDPR to their third-party advertising revenue in Europe. So that would imply that, well, okay, maybe that Google Facebook thing was a blip. Facebook, on the other hand, says that European monthly active users and daily active users may be flat to slightly down in Q2 as a result of GDPR. However, they say we do not anticipate these changes will impact advertising revenue. They also indicated that their profit margins would be reduced because of the cost of GDPR-related maintenance, ongoing maintenance to comply with it. Twitter said the law will contribute to a further decline in its active users of the service. Wix.com, which is a web design company, said it hasn't seen any impact on its business as a result of GDPR. Google, very carefully, Sundar Pichai said, too early to tell. We don't know. Not enough data in. We're a big data company. We don't know. And then the VP of marketing at a company called Janrain said that in their consent reconfirmation outreach, less than 8% of folks in the database declined permission to serve them full advertisements, and only 5% went as far as to deny the right to record any data. They said most people were fine with it as long as they knew what we were recording. However, email was a different matter. On their email lists, only 22% of those who began the double opt-in process completed it. So seeing a mixed reaction there. I think this, obviously isn't every company out there, but it kind of gives you an overview of how the companies are reacting. Any surprises for either of you guys in there?
Not really. I mean, I think it's, so I want to get this right. Europe, the European Union and the United States view the legalities of interacting with customers differently. The US's laws are designed to protect the consumer. The European Union's laws are designed to protect companies, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, the GDPR is designed to protect the consumer.
It is, but it's and that's what I'm trying to get to. So mm-hmm. This is kind of new territory for them.
I see.
In a way. So they did it in a way where it doesn't feel onerous. We've made changes in our company to be ready. We're not in Europe yet, but just to be ready for it, and it's not really a big deal. So we'll see.
Well, and there have been several companies, and some of them are publications that all of a sudden went dark, right? In certain places where the EU GDPR rules went into effect. And that's another question. Not every company thinks it's really advantageous to change too much of its model that's working well if enough of their customer base is outside of these rules anyway.
I imagine somebody's going to do the calculus between like, okay, so if we don't comply with GDPR and we just turn Europe off, what does that do to our bottom line versus the amount of money we would spend to implement? And I think probably everyone's having that conversation.
Tronc, the former Tribune company before it decided to be called Tronc, owners of the LA Times, Chicago Tribune, news outlets like that, decided to block all European readers. Lee Enterprises, which runs the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, decided to block all European users. USA Today offers an alternate version, as does NPR, to European users, which is interesting because Catchpoint said that US pages on average are loading at 10.22 seconds per page, while after GDPR, Europe's web pages are loading in just over half a second.
Wow.
So making someone GDPR compliant, and it's probably a bigger deal than just, not running advertisements. It made people look at their pages and say, well, what is all this stuff in here? Some of the stuff we're not using anymore, get rid of it. Mm-hmm. Whereas companies that didn't do that still have a lot of cruft that just builds up over the years, as well as more intrusive advertisements and data collection.
Well, I've noticed a similar experience, which doesn't involve GDPR, but I use Brave browser on my phone, and Brave browser automatically blocks third-party advertisements, cookies, all sorts of different things like that before they even reach your device. And in that sense, it does save a lot of time. So given that they've pretty much knocked off, 10 seconds off of the load time? That's a lot of time. That means that they had a lot of third-party information on the back end, and some of that could have been very insecure, given that there's malvertising, which is still a very prominent portion of malware that's available in the public whenever you're browsing around online. So in that sense, it's a really positive thing for consumers, given that you're going to receive your load times a lot quicker now, as opposed to those 10-second things. I mean, over time, that's going to save you a year of your life.
Makes me want to VPN to Germany just to surf the web, right?
I know, right?
Privacy Badger, which I use, has a similar effect, right? Because it just blocks anything that it thinks is tracking you across sites without your permission. And you can tell it, no, that's okay. You can let them track me. It's fine. So it gives you control, but again, speeds up those page loads. So the final thing to mention is Whois. We've mentioned this on the show before, but it has not been resolved. There's still a disagreement over whether gathering information for DNS records violates the GDPR. And some registrars are no longer collecting the address records and things that ICANN requires. ICANN has gone to court in the EU to ask the EU to define them as an exception, saying, no, if you register a domain name, we require a mailing address. And we always have. And, it's you need to rewrite things. And some people are saying that really all they need to do is rewrite their contracts. But there is some legal confusion over that.
Doesn't having a I forgot what it's called, but basically protected registrant, doesn't that get rid of the problem?
Yeah, but it's all about what you ask for. ICANN requires the registrars to ask for it. Protected registrants can then keep it from being displayed publicly, but it's still collected.
Yeah, you don't have a choice in the manner when you sign up for a domain. You have to give them a physical address of some kind. Yeah. And some domain registrants, they actually send you a postcard in the mail to ensure that you actually live there. And you have to put in that code or whatever it might be on their website. Which personally, given that I have to pay $7 a year or something like that just to protect my privacy and my physical address, because I don't want nobody showing up at my front door. I don't think it's very fair. I don't think that we should have to have physical addresses. I know why it's there. I understand why ICANN, requires you to have that information. I just wish that it was optional.
The flip side of that conversation, of course, is if you remove any information from a domain registrant, they're free to do whatever they want with impunity.
Exactly. And that's why they require that information from you, so that they're able to report it if there is some kind of law breaking or something like that.
Well, and theoretically, though, you don't need a home address to provide domain name system service. Yeah. So it violates that forced consent law, which is why I think they're saying, well, we can redo the contracts that describe why we need it better, that make it an element that is required. But this is where GDPR does break down, is there is a lot of vagary in the rules that people don't know how it's going to be enforced because it hasn't been tested in court. There's no precedent.
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, that's it. This has been a fantastic roundtable episode. Thanks to everybody for joining us.
Yes, in fact, extra special thanks to Shannon and Rob for being with us today. Shannon, we'll start with you. Let folks know where they can keep up with everything you're doing outside of these wonderful roundtable shows.
Absolutely. So you can find me over on techthing.com. That's tekthing.com. We recently, just on Thursday, reviewed the brand new Lenovo Smart Display. So that's the one that comes with Google Assistant built into it. And it was actually really cool. But you'll have to watch it. You'll have to watch it to listen to our comparison to the Amazon Echo Show, which we did make a comparison to. So that was pretty fun to do. Also on hack5, hak5.org, I've been doing ThreatWire as usual, discussing all the security and privacy topics that are going on right now. And the thing that I've been doing as a hobby for the past couple of months is my new YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/SailorSnubs. I know it's a ridiculous name, but I am obsessed with Sailor Moon. So it's all about Sailor Moon, the anime and manga from Japan. So if you're interested in learning about it, you can definitely check out my channel. It's youtube.com/SailorSnubs. Please subscribe because I'm going to do a giveaway when I hit 500. Yay!
Kawaii.
Rob DeMillo, always nice to have you on the show. You're such a good roundtable guest. You bring the knowledge.
I bring the lack of hair.
But that's you can have both. You can have both. In fact, I think there's well, anyway, I won't get into hair loss. But let folks know where they can keep up with everything else you do outside of these shows.
You can find most of the stuff about me on aboutme.com or about.me actually, Rob DeMillo. And then I am CTO at nimblecollective.com. We're doing animation up in the cloud. It's a ton of fun. So check that out too.
Good
Excellent.
times.
Hey, folks, would you like more of these kinds of shows? Do you like this? Our next milestone is just $2,500 away on Patreon. Would get us up to 2 roundtable episodes a month. Join on in the fun or up your pledge, and you can get some cool perks like the show Good Day Internet, which includes DTNS and a whole lot more. Exclusive columns. Sarah Lane just posted one yesterday for the associate producer level, and there's all kinds of stuff like being able to vote on the roundtable topics available at patreon.com/DTNS.
If you want to get a hold of us, you got a question, you got a comment, you just want to get something off your chest, we'll take it. Our email address is feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. If you'd like to join us live Monday through Friday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 2030 UTC, put it on your calendar or find out more at dailytechnewsshow.com/live.
Back on Monday with Lamarr Wilson. Talk to you then.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Great show, you guys.
Very good roundtable. You guys are great. Yay.
Yes.
Yay.
Was that a frog pants dance, Shannon?
That was my coworkers are outside the studio making funny faces at me.
I got the same thing.
I've got a
like amazing smarts.
And you've been crying this entire show. Very
Oh.
bad. She's like, why am I never a roundtable guest?
Aw.
She says,
Because you never answer
GDPR,
Roger's
what's
email.
that? Yeah. Right. Lucy, use your Gmail. Then you'll know.
She had a lot of comments on GDPR.
So I've been recording those Sailor Snubs videos at home, and my cat, I have to lock her out or else she will climb in my Sailor Moon collection and knock things over. And she sits outside the room and she goes,
Oh my gosh.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Drives me crazy.
That is what happens to me every day at 5:30 a.m.
I'm so sorry.
Right. Because my cats are allowed to sleep with me.
Yeah.
Because why not? It's a cuddle party. But they'll start bothering me. So if I lock them out of the bedroom, then it's like...
I do that too.
Sometimes on a good day, I'll get like 30 minutes. But sometimes, especially one of my cats more than the other one, we'll just not even get into who's at fault. We'll just start, like literally yodeling outside, like making like the weirdest voices where like no one can sleep through that. Super weird. And she knows it.
I laugh because I've been there.
Do we have a title, Roger?
Firmware updates in space. Money, Sex, and Lies.
Likes.
Oh, likes.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Money,
it's
Sex,
not
and
funny.
That's kind of a good.
yeah.
Money, Sex, and Lies. Yeah.
Money, Sex, and Lies is a real thing.
Yeah, that's just normal.
You know, they're gonna reboot Mean Girls, and I'm sure a social networking tool like that's gonna be a central part of it.
They are?
No, they will.
Oh.
They will. Mars Milkshake, and
You drink my milkshake. I drink your milkshake.
Twice this week.
Teens
There
are
will be
aliens.
blood, gotta mention.
I drink your milkshake.
Teens are aliens.
Mean Girls, the musical, officially coming to Broadway.
I would watch that.
Lindsay Lohan
She's really?
Is
is
she really
involved.
She's starring in the
I
musical?
don't know if she's starring.
Oh. Well, I mean, she would have to, right?
When Tina Fey
Oh, no,
was
she's
Well, no, I
saying
guess
she wants a film of it.
when Tina Fey was guest hosting SNL a couple months ago, they were talking about this, and they did a little piece where she was trying to bully her way into being part of it.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Very funny.
Oh. I didn't realize that skit was based on
Come to
something
conclusion.
that's actually happening.
So what do we call it, Roger?
Teens are aliens. Or do you like Money, Sex, and Likes?
Money, Sex, and Likes. I think that's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Probably shouldn't use the. Well, I don't know. Do you monetize YouTube?
Oh yeah, right.
'Cause
Whenever they let us.
sex having that in the title will demonetize it.
Monetize.
Most likely.
We're used to that. We appeal that
Right?
multiple times a week. Having DTNS in the title apparently
What?
demonetized.
That's
Really?
ridiculous.
Roger, how often are you doing it late anymore?
It's not as bad as it was a month ago. A month ago was like every one a week. Now it's maybe one a month.
Wow.
Like, and I don't know. Sometimes even before the show's live, it's been flagged.
Yeah,
Wow.
mine too.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's like, well, we haven't even started anything.
YouTube.
Probably because
Yeah.
there's a hamster that runs the content flagging system.
God, that would be great if that was true.
It's like a little on the ball, like
I would
it's
pay
a
money for that.
TensorFlow processing unit attached to a hamster wheel to power it, and with a machine learning
I
algorithm.
would pay good hard-earned cash. See that?
Someone
Every once
should
in a while,
do
a
that.
hamster gets tired and the bot goes down.
have a hamster powered search engine where they just like you type in something and they just start running and they stop in something and it just automatically pulls up a result. It doesn't have to be anything you search for.
That is how it works.
I want to look for home loans.
Isn't that like Stumble Upon?
Oh, Stumble Upon.
You know, originally kind of
I remember
like,
Stumble
Stumble
Upon.
Upon.
yeah, there's too many choices. We'll just give you something good.
What was the video service? 20 seconds.
Remember Chat Roulette?
Oh gosh.
Oh yeah.
I was honestly, okay, this is funny. I was trying to think about this the other day because we were talking about Facebook Watch Party. And Chat Roulette obviously is different, but I was like, what was that one thing from years ago where you just like would randomly get hooked up with somebody else with a webcam, you know, and there was no rhyme or reason. And I'm searching because I couldn't remember the name Chat Roulette, and I'm searching on Google like old web 1.0 video chat inappropriate. You know, there were so many like strings that I had to put together. It took me a while before I finally found an article I was looking for.
That probably produced 0 results.
It produced the wrong ones.
Yeah.
Well, the wrong.
A lot of times when I get reminded by something like that, it's because of a similar thing that just happened or came out. And when I search for it, all I can get is the new thing.
Yeah.
So I go into Google and I change the search parameters to say, only give me results up until like February of last year.
Oh, you know what? That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
To just filter out newer news.
Unless you forget and then you try and look something in the past up.
Well, it's not persistent, thankfully. But yeah, that's especially when I'm updating my tech history links. A lot of times I have to go do that.
Do you do that regularly?
Oh yeah, I have a new appreciation for the ephemerality of the web. People change their links constantly. I'm always having to go back and check the links for daily tech history citations.
Wow.
And I probably change 2 or 3 a month that have gone bad. And they're quite often corporations' history pages. where it's like, AT&T had a history page where it talked about this was the first phone call. This was the first mobile phone call. And then they'll just get rid of that page or move it somewhere else and not forward it. It's the worst.
Insert White House joke here.
Ephemeral.
Richard Nixon. We miss you. Good old reel tape. Never goes away except for 18 minutes every once in a while.
Yeah.
We still got a library.
I've been to that library. It's a good library.
Is it?
You can actually listen to the Watergate tapes. They have them display.
I'm sure they're on the internet somewhere.
Well, they are. They are now too. Yeah.
Does it have a recorded voice of Nixon saying, "Welcome to my library"?
I wish they had his head in a jar when you walked in.
Oh, you'd be like a Futurama?
Yeah. Oh, sadly, it does not.
Oh, this is I haven't read the article yet, but someone in our boss's Slack posted a Gizmodo article. The headline is, "Woman says Ancestry.com test revealed her parents' fertility doctor was actually her father."
What?
Which is like not unethical, really.
Well, it depends.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, totally.
Don't unpack that statement too carefully.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Anyway, yeah. Head over to Gizmodo for some science.
Science and scandal.
Yeah.
What's going on with our episode numbers? I thought yesterday was all 3s.
What?
But
I thought
according
it
to the
was too.
website,
I wanted to be on all 3s.
Yeah, what happened? What do you mean?
no, yesterday was all 3s, but it in the blog post it says 3335.
My fault.
Okay.
My fault. Change it to 4.
Got it. Done.
I wanted to be the 333. We could have been half the battle.
That's the mark of the mark of this sofa. I don't know.
It's a mark of a certified public accountant.
Or a wacky new sitcom. 3333.
All right, we're gonna risk money, sex, and likes because by golly, we should have the right to put that word in a title. There's nothing wrong with that when responsibly
There's nothing
used.
lewd with the word sex.
And they were never heard from again.
That was the last episode ever.
It's been
Remember
fun,
to
everyone.
change my fish's water every week.
Oh my god!
Don't forget to change the number on YouTube. Even though that video will get taken down because of the title. It's a whole thing.
You've never had a provocative title before, or as I call it, a title with just words in it.
Yeah.
Provocative sometimes, as long as it feels really.
We try not to put curse words in there,
Yeah.
like outright.
Or something that's like sensational that wouldn't deliver.
Yeah.
My most provocative title I've had was I was groped at a HackerCon. And surprisingly, that did not get demonetized on YouTube. But my vlog from the Charles Dickens Fair did get demonetized. And I was like, it's Charles Dickens.
Didn't Apple flag?
Really?
Very controversial.
Didn't Apple flag a
Hitchcock?
No, it was Homerian. There was a Homerian graphic novel.
Oh.
Do you remember this?
I remember Hitchcock getting blocked somewhere.
Hitchcock.
Oh my gosh.
I remember our intern in PA, Graham Hancock, getting blocked on Twitter because of his name.
Oh, poor Graham.
Really?
Yeah.
You're kidding.
Oh.
I mean, that.
It's just like, that's his last name.
Did he have like
Where do I
send in his
start?
ID?
Nah, I think it was like a back and forth email. It's like,
It shouldn't have been, Roger. That shouldn't have been his last name.
Well, you know, we don't get to pick our families. All right.
Also, that's not. I mean, his last name is not a bad word. There are little words inside, lots of bigger words all the time.
Folks, we're going to say goodbye to the live viewers because this video will never be seen.
Money, sex, and likes, guys.
But I hope you enjoyed the
Internet.
roundtable. Video viewers, audio listeners, stick around. You're free to continue to listen.
Yeah.